My brother looked me in the eye at Dad's funeral and said, "Don't worry, I'll handle everything with a will. You just focus on grieving." What he didn't know was that I'd been secretly recording our conversations about Dad's estate for 6 months, ever since I noticed suspicious changes in Dad's behavior and financial decisions. When the lawyer read the will and announced that my brother Marcus inherited everything, all $2.3 million, while I got nothing, I wasn't surprised. But when I played those recordings for the FBI, my brother's face went white. That's when everyone learned that stealing an inheritance through elder abuse and forged power of attorney documents is a federal crime. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and financial fraud, if content like this interests you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you more amazing real-life stories like this one. Now, let's get into what happened. My name is Ryan Morrison, I'm 44 years old, and this is the story of how my older brother systematically manipulated our dying father, forged legal documents, and stole our family's entire inheritance, and how 6 months of secret recordings helped the FBI send him to federal prison. My father, William Morrison, was a successful small business owner who built Morrison's Auto Parts from a single garage into a chain of 12 stores across 3 states. By the time he was ready to retire in 2021, the business was worth approximately $2.8 million, and he had additional real estate investments worth about $800,000. Dad had always been clear about his intentions. Both Marcus and I would inherit equally the business, the properties, everything split down the middle. "You boys built this together with me," he'd always said. "It belongs to both of you." Marcus, 46, had worked in the business since high school and eventually became operations manager. I took a different path, became a cybersecurity analyst for a tech company, but I still helped with the books every tax season and had always been involved in major business decisions. Our mother passed away in 2018, and Dad handled it well initially, but by early 2022, at age 73, he was starting to show signs of cognitive decline. Nothing dramatic, just minor forgetfulness, confusion about dates, difficulty managing complex paperwork. That's when Marcus stepped in as the helpful son. March 2022, Marcus convinced Dad to move into a senior living community. "It's for your safety, Dad," he argued. "Ryan and I worry about you living alone in that big house." At first it seemed reasonable. The facility was nice. Dad seemed to adjust well, and Marcus visited frequently. But I started noticing changes in Dad's attitude toward me during our weekly visits. "Ryan, you know you've never really been committed to the family business," Dad said one afternoon. "Marcus is the one who's been here every day for 25 years. This was completely out of character." Dad had always praised my technical skills and the way I'd modernized their computer systems, but suddenly he was viewing our different career paths as a lack of commitment on my part. Marcus began controlling access to Dad. "He gets tired easily," Marcus would tell me. "Maybe limit your visits to once a week." Meanwhile, Marcus was there, almost daily, often staying for hours. I started noticing other red flags. Dad mentioned that Marcus was helping him organize his financial documents. Bills that used to come to Dad's house were now being forwarded to Marcus's address. Dad's longtime financial advisor mentioned that Marcus had been asking detailed questions about Dad's investment portfolios. Most concerning was a conversation I had with Dad in June 2022. "Son, I'm thinking about updating my will," he said. "Marcus thinks I should make some changes to reflect who's really been taking care of the family business." That's when I decided to start documenting everything. As a cybersecurity professional, I understood the importance of evidence and documentation. I also knew the laws around recording conversations in our state. One-party consent, meaning I could legally record any conversation I was part of. I started carrying a small digital recorder during every interaction with Marcus or Dad. I also began keeping detailed notes of every conversation, every change in Dad's behavior, and every suspicious decision. The first major revelation came in July 2022. Marcus called me, ostensibly to discuss Dad's care, but the conversation quickly turned to inheritance planning. "You know, Ryan, Dad's been saying he wants to simplify things," Marcus said. "Maybe it would be easier if one person handled the business transition, and then we could work out the details later." "What kind of details?" I asked, making sure my recorder was running. "Well, you've got your tech career. You don't really need the business income like I do. Maybe Dad could leave the business operations to me, and we could arrange some kind of buyout for your share later." This was the first time Marcus had ever suggested anything other than the equal split Dad had always planned. I pressed him for details. "Have you been talking to Dad about this?" I asked. "Just thinking out loud," Marcus replied. "But Dad has mentioned that he wants to make sure the business stays in capable hands." 2 weeks later, I recorded a conversation with Dad that made my blood run cold. "Ryan, I've been thinking about your future," Dad said during one of our visits. "You've done well in computers, but you don't really understand the auto parts business like Marcus does." This was completely contrary to everything Dad had ever said. I'd grown up in those stores, knew the suppliers, understood the customer base, Dad had always valued my input on business decisions. Dad, where is this coming from? I asked gently. Marcus has been explaining things to me, Dad replied. He thinks it might be better if he takes over the business completely, and maybe we find another way to take care of you. In August 2022, Marcus called with urgent news. Dad had a minor medical episode, he said. Nothing serious, but the doctor thinks he should have someone with power of attorney to help with medical and financial decisions. This seemed reasonable given Dad's age and cognitive changes. But Marcus's next suggestion raised immediate red flags. I think I should be the one to handle it, Marcus said. I'm already managing most of his day-to-day affairs, and it would be simpler than trying to coordinate between both of us. I insisted on being present when Dad signed the power of attorney documents. The meeting was at a lawyer's office, not Dad's longtime attorney, but someone Marcus had found. During that meeting, I recorded everything I legally could. The lawyer, David Chen, seemed to be rushing through the paperwork and didn't adequately explain what Dad was signing. This just gives Marcus the ability to help with your banking and medical decisions, Chen told Dad. Nothing changes about your will or your estate planning, but I noticed the power of attorney document was unusually broad, giving Marcus's control over nearly all of Dad's financial affairs. After the meeting, I pulled Marcus aside. This seems like a lot of authority, I said, recording our conversation. Ryan, don't you trust me? Marcus replied. I'm just trying to help Dad. If you want to be involved in every little decision, maybe you should have taken a more active role in his care earlier. This was classic manipulation, making me feel guilty for not being as available as Marcus, who lived closer and had more flexible work hours over the next few months. I recorded dozens of conversations that documented a pattern of Marcus gradually isolating Dad from outside input and steering him toward decisions that benefited Marcus exclusively. In November 2022, Marcus mentioned casually that Dad was updating his estate planning. Nothing major, Marcus said during a recorded phone call. Just making sure everything reflects his current wishes. I immediately tried to contact Dad's longtime attorney, Robert Mills, who had handled our family's legal matters for 15 years. Mills's office told me that Dad was no longer a client. He had retrieved all his documents in October. When I asked Dad about this during our next visit, he seemed confused. Marcus said Mills was getting too expensive. Dad told me that new lawyer is much more affordable and understands what we need. The new lawyer was David Chen, the same attorney who had handled the power of attorney paperwork. I later discovered that Chen had been practicing law for less than 3 years and specialized in estate planning for seniors, which often meant exploiting elderly clients. In December 2022, I recorded a conversation with Marcus that revealed the true scope of his plan. Dad's decided he wants to leave the business to me. Marcus told me during what he thought was a casual brotherly chat. He thinks it makes more sense than splitting it up. What about the equal inheritance he's always talked about? I asked. Ryan, you've got to understand Dad's perspective, Marcus replied. You left the family business to pursue your own career. He wants to reward the son who stayed loyal. This was pure manipulation. I hadn't left the family business. I had built a successful career while still contributing to family operations. Every tax season. Has Dad actually said he wants to change the inheritance split? I asked directly. He's been thinking about it for months, Marcus said. I think he'll make it official soon. In January 2023, Dad's health took a significant downturn. He was hospitalized for pneumonia and seemed much more confused when he recovered. Marcus used this opportunity to accelerate his timeline. Dad wants to get his affairs in order while he still can, Marcus told me during a recorded call. He's going to finalize his new will this week. I rushed to visit Dad in the hospital, but Marcus had already filled out paperwork limiting visitors to immediate family, making medical decisions effectively just himself, since he held the power of attorney. When I finally got to see Dad, he was weak but lucid enough to have a conversation I'll never forget. Ryan, I'm worried about what happens to you boys after I'm gone, Dad said. I want to make sure the business stays strong. Dad, you always said you wanted Marcus and me to inherit equally. I reminded him. Dad looked confused. Did I say that? Marcus tells me I always intended the business to go to him since he's been running it. This was when I realized the extent of the cognitive manipulation. Marcus had been systematically rewriting Dad's memories, convincing him that decisions he'd never made were actually his long-standing intentions. 3 days later, Marcus called with the news. Dad signed his new will yesterday. He said, I wanted to give you a heads up before the lawyer contacts you. What changed? I asked, recording everything. Ryan, Dad decided that since you've built your own career, you don't need the business income. He's leaving the business and properties to me, but there's a small cash inheritance for you. How small? I asked. $50,000, Marcus replied. Dad thought that was fair. $50,000 out of a $3.6 million estate. Dad was essentially leaving me the equivalent of a modest car while giving Marcus everything else. Dad passed away in March 2023, 2 months after signing the new will. The funeral was heartbreaking, not just because I'd lost my father, but because I suspected I'd lost him to my brother's manipulation months earlier at the funeral. Marcus played the role of the grieving son perfectly. "Ryan, I know this is hard," he said, putting his arm around me, "but Dad's in a better place now, and we'll get through this together." What he didn't know was that I had over 40 hours of recorded conversations documenting his systematic manipulation of our father. Will reading was scheduled for the following week. Marcus had arranged for it to be held at David Chen's office, with both of us present. Chen read through the will with what seemed like rehearsed efficiency. The business, the real estate investments, the cash accounts, everything went to Marcus, except for a $50,000 cash bequest to me. "I'm sorry, Ryan," Marcus said after the reading, "but this is what Dad wanted." But I noticed something Chen had glossed over quickly. The will was dated January 15th, 2023, just 2 days after Dad's hospitalization for pneumonia, and Dad's signature looked shaky and uncertain compared to documents I'd seen him sign just months earlier. I took my evidence to the FBI's elder fraud unit. Agent Sarah Kim listened to selected recordings and reviewed my documentation for 3 hours. "Mr. Morrison, what you've documented appears to be a textbook case of elder financial abuse," she told me. "The systematic isolation, the cognitive manipulation, the forged legal documents, this is organized fraud." The FBI investigation moved quickly. They discovered that Chen had a pattern of helping family members steal inheritances from elderly relatives. Bank records showed Marcus had been transferring money from Dad's accounts to his own for months before Dad's death. Most damning was handwriting analysis of Dad's signatures. The will signature showed clear signs of forgery, pressure patterns, and letter formations that were inconsistent with Dad's actual handwriting. Even accounting for age-related changes, the recordings I'd made over 6 months provided a complete timeline of Marcus's manipulation. The FBI could hear Dad's confusion growing, Marcus's lies becoming more elaborate, and the systematic way he'd isolated Dad from outside influence. Marcus was arrested 6 weeks after Dad's funeral. Marcus was charged with elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. David Chen was charged as a co-conspirator. Both were convicted after a trial where my recordings served as primary evidence. During the trial, Marcus tried to claim that Dad had genuinely changed his mind about the inheritance, but the recordings painted a clear picture of manipulation and cognitive abuse. Marcus received 8 years in federal prison. Chen received 6 years and was disbarred. The fraudulent will was voided, and Dad's original estate plan was restored. Marcus and I inherited equally, as Dad had always intended, but the victory felt hollow. I'd gotten justice, but I'd lost both my father and my brother in the process. The civil lawsuit against Marcus and Chen resulted in additional damages for the emotional trauma and legal costs. Marcus had to sell his house and liquidate his retirement accounts to pay the settlement. Today, I use my experience to help other families recognize signs of elder financial abuse. I speak at senior centers and provide cybersecurity consultation for elder care facilities. The recordings that saved my inheritance also helped the FBI identify other victims of Chen's schemes. 3 additional families received justice because of the evidence. I'd gathered the most important lesson is that elder abuse often comes from within the family, and it can be prevented if someone is paying attention and willing to act. Dad always said family was the most important thing. Marcus forgot that family means protecting each other, not exploiting each other. 6 months of secret recordings saved a $2.3 million inheritance, but more importantly, they protected Dad's true wishes and ensured that his legacy honored the values he actually believed in.